Hey guys, welcome. I am Ansha. I am your host for the session today. Welcome to the first episode of BOC Talks Season 2. BOC Talks is an initiative by the Beckn Open Collective to showcase our community champions who've been building something innovative using Beckn Protocol. At Beckn Open Collective, we believe in creating an open and inclusive world free of all digital unfreedoms. And today we are here with one such champion, Akhil from Pulse Energy. In a while, Akhil will have the stage and he'll talk all about how he has built Pulse Energy and why did he choose the route of an open protocol. But before we get started, I believe a lot of you here are already a part of the Beckn Open Collective community. If you are not, the links to join the community will be in the chat box. Also, let's do a quick poll and see how many of you here are a part of the community. Meanwhile, the results of the polls are coming in. Let me also quickly walk you through around what is expected in the session today. So obviously, we have Akhil here talking all about Pulse Energy, the challenges of the EV market. How did he build Pulse Energy using UEI? What are the future prospects with UEI? And like I said, why did he choose the route of taking open protocols and creating an interoperable solution? Also in this session, we will be taking, towards the end of the session, Akhil will be taking any questions that you guys might have. So during the entire session, feel free to punch in your questions in the chat box and we'll take them up towards the end of the session. This will be sort of a moderated talk. We have some questions already lined up for Akhil. We'll get started with that. Also, if you're building something in the sustainable mobility space, stay tuned towards the end of the session. We have a very exciting announcement coming up. So yeah, without any further ado, let's get started. Let's do what we are here to do. So Akhil, why don't you start by introducing yourself and introducing Pulse Energy for us?
Sure. So thank you, Ansha. Thanks for the introduction. Thank you for having me. So my name is Akhil.
Always a pleasure.
I'm one of the co-founders of Pulse Energy. Pulse Energy, in a nutshell, is energy as a service API. So we have been operational for quite some time. We've been working with almost 10 plus CPOs, charge point operators in India, and we service roughly about 8,000 EV drivers on a regular basis. The biggest challenge that I saw in the market, the problem statement that we were after, was the fact that everyone's going to invest the money in setting up charging stations. But one of the biggest challenges that they have, or someone who's setting up a charging station, is increasing utilization. So we set out to solve for that. And we soon realized that it's not going to be one company or one startup solving it for them. It has to be, the entire country coming together, and it motivates others to kind of join that effort as well. So that's the reason why I kind of embraced Beckn, and I'll talk more about it in the latest stage. But that's the idea. That's what we do. That's what our mission is. Looking forward to this session.
So let's deep dive a little into these challenges that you're mentioning, that one service provider cannot solve this energy problem. So can you walk us through or give us an overview of what are the challenges the EV market currently faces, especially in the terms of infrastructure and the softwares available in the market today?
Yeah. So let me just switch to slides a little bit, because I think it's always better to have slides while we are talking about this. So let me just move this. Okay. So this is the problem statement. If you have to, assuming that all of us are in a conference room and I'm in front of this whiteboard and I'm explaining to people how complex this problem is. So what you're seeing in this image are different participants in a EV charging ecosystem. So assuming the blue box is one operator, let's have one charging operator, and the blue dot is a customer of that network. So let's say, let's just take the largest player in the market, right? Like Tata Power. So this is Tata Power's chargers. and this is a Tata Power user. So, if I'm in Mumbai and I'm using Tata Power just because it's near my home, if that user needs to access another CPO's network, there needs to be a bilateral agreement between that CPO and another CPO in order to just use that other charger. Ultimately, at the fundamental level, this is an energy dispensing device. An energy dispensing device should be dispensing energy irrespective of where the user came from. Are they part of this closed group, or are they part of the open ecosystem? Doesn't matter. That device has a task of dispensing energy. The user should get it. So today, in this complex world that we live in, and again, it's all closed walled gardens, right? Just for this user, or let's take even the yellow dot, which belongs to another operator's network. If that yellow dot is me and I need to access someone else's charger who is in someone else's network, I need to go through, or I need to make sure that that charging operator is tied up with some other party, and that some other party is tied up with some other party. Now, what does this cause, right? So this is going to cause the whole what telco industry looks like today. Like there's just three people and three big players. It's also going to cause a lot of time and delay for all of them to come together, right? It gets treated as closed loop systems. And what we end up seeing is a lot of users end up downloading like multiple applications because of multiple networks. So that's the problem statement. And this is why it was necessary to, how do you break the walls, that's closing this ecosystem out? That's the journey. That's where we started this. And that's the biggest challenge in the market, Ansha.
Awesome. So we all know that pulse energy, this ecosystem could have been enabled only using UEI. Can you help us understand a bit more about UEI? What is UEI and how is pulse energy leveraging it?
Sure. So I'll walk you through sort of what our thinking process was when we started this, right? So let's just go through, before I get into like what this diagram is, context. So we were trying to solve for this before even UEI existed. We built our own closed loop sort of aggregator model. And what we soon realized is, okay, you know what? Even though we build that framework, there will still be a lot of work that is needed for others to build the similar architecture. And it was just like replicating what we have done, right? So that was one, I was like, it doesn't make sense. Like if we have built it, let's just open it up and enable others. When we started going through that process, if we open up our own network and enable others, then we become a private network. Like it becomes, it's Pulse Energy's network that everyone's leveraging. That doesn't make sense. And there's going to be, again, contractual and business relationship problems that may happen there. So we started exploring other, what protocols can we leverage? And I had worked at Amazon, before Pulse Energy. And at Amazon, we were very familiar with, I was in the retail team, we were familiar with ONDC and how that works. So I had a little bit of taste of what Beckn was at that point. And soon enough, I found my way stumbling into what if Beckn could be leveraged for something like this? Because the way I look at it is ONDC is a Beckn network where the commodity of trade is goods, right? You're exchanging goods. What if you could leverage a Beckn network or a Beckn protocol where the commodity of trade is energy, right? What if we could envision it in that way? And similarly, you could build Beckn networks for different types of commodity of trade, right? So that's where it started. And reached out to Sujit and the Beckn team. Very interestingly, it is, again, when people look at a new idea, if there's a solid problem to solve, then you have a lot of people coming together. So, and that's really what I liked about the Beckn Open Collective and the group that is there, because you wouldn't get that kind of support if it was elsewhere, right? We've gone through the phases of going to other folks and trying to solve this. And this was one of the best ways in which we could figure out how to solve this. So coming into this, fundamentally what we looked at was, okay, what if there is let's just look at internet protocol, right? And this is the basics of Beckn. So how does internet protocol work? Or how does your computer or you as a user access a computer, type a website in, and it goes through the internet and figures out which server and which packet to get? It's all fundamentally based on different set of protocols. So we decided, hey, what if we could do a similar thing where you leverage existing backend protocols. So you have a user through a mobile app or through a vehicle. If they are given or prescribed, hey, here's an open API protocol that you can use to access a network that no one controls, a decentralized network. And if they could discover the routes to servers or charging infrastructure servers that also speak a similar protocol, what if that could happen, right? And then the whole point of this was, it's creating the common language. It's not creating the infrastructure. It is creating that common language. So that was the initial thought process. And then we said, okay, you know what? Let's start with the simplest use case. And whenever, my guidance to folks, even in this call, whenever you're looking at building new things on Beckn, always look for the simplest use case. Simplest use case that you can tackle. Don't look at the, hey, my user needs all these edge cases. Don't. Start with the bare minimum, simplify it, right? What's that simple action that you can do? And then take that forward. So that's what we did. And we just picked up, hey, let's just do a search query, right? I'm a user. Yeah. I have this application, or I'm standing in Kurmangala. I want to see what are the closest chargers near me. Simple, right? A very simple query. How would that work? How would I visualize that? And that's what we did. Like, we just went through, we picked up what Beckn was as an API contract. And we didn't change anything in Beckn apart from the context message, right? And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But when we started looking at it, fundamentally all the API endpoints that Beckn had, all of that fit very well into a transaction, sort of messaging protocol. Because, like, if you go to a shop and you're trading with someone or negotiating with someone, you would have the similar sort of conversation back and forth. So Beckn sort of preserved that, right? Like, and ONDC was like the perfect platform that stress tested that out. And they have all of that prescribed in. You don't have to build anything new. So the idea was, okay, how do we just leverage that? Because it has all the context and nuances that is needed in a trade, right? In a trade activity or exchange activity or data exchange activity. And how do I take that, change what is inside that? Whether it's, changing the context message or changing a particular parameter in there, can we do that? And that's where the flexibility came in, right? I think that's how we were able to kind of pull this off. And there are more, and then from there, we got everyone aligned. We showed this to CPOs, we showed this to, some of the government policy folks, got all their buy-in. And that's how the journey started. Like, that's how we looked at Beckn, because A, the team was just very collaborative. B, we started, like, as an individual, as an organization who was looking to solve a problem. We didn't go to them with, hey, this is our preconceived notions. Here's what we need to do. Here's the 7 things that we need to know. We just said, hey, if the smallest use case can be, can successfully be built on something like this, because you have to bring 2 worlds together, right? Like, Beckn before UEI was more of, transaction goods oriented. So here there was a new opportunity to look at energy as a function, and then build, the whole framework together. So yeah, that's how the journey is, Ansha.
Thank you, Akhil, for explaining it so beautifully to us. I'm sure explain something so new age wasn't very easy for you to explain to the CPOs and the government bodies. That being said, I think everybody here is super excited to see how pulse energy actually works and what does it look like. So if you could show us possibly a demo or anything that helps us understand.
Yep. So let me just show you how, before I go into the demo piece, right? I'll just kind of walk you guys through, like, once you've done the search, we went through the journey of, okay, what does software topology look like today? And what would it be tomorrow, right? So today, this is exactly what it looks like. So you have individual closed loop networks, walled gardens, they don't speak to each other. They have their own sort of custom language that goes on between the apps and the chargers and the servers. So in the future, the idea here was, what if we bring the whole Beckn piece into this? How would this look like? And it fit very well. There's no more walled gardens, and it preserved what CPOs or charge point operators wanted as fundamentally, even if they remove the architecture, break down those walls. The reason why they put up those walls was they don't want to exchange data. They don't want someone else figuring out, how much their charge is being utilized. They didn't want to exchange information. Here, it was preserving all of those best interests, like their interests in mind. And that's the reason why this is getting embraced, right? Like, so it was not just about, hey, there's this new fancy protocol that's, it works. That wasn't the reason why they brought in, because for them, it's additional investment. Like they always have to build something new. But what really helped them out is the fact that the reason why they put up the wall, that was already getting solved, right? We were preserving those. We kept their interest in mind and then said, hey, you know what? We can still drive business to you without actually sacrificing any of those interests that you have in mind. So that's how we started this, and that's how we got the buy-in. It wasn't easy, but we went through the journey. And the way I look at this is, again, for folks who are listening to this call, right? In the future, this is how it will look like. So you saw when I started the sort of presentation, you saw how there were multiple contracts necessary between parties to even do this. Ultimately, the way once this is taken to production and it's running, there would be just a single certification process for anyone who is looking to participate in the network. That's the way we are thinking about it, right? So with that, you would get access to multiple networks. Applications would get access to it. Now, folks looking at this, who is looking to build on UEI, the biggest thing that I would say is, don't look at this network as solving the EV charging problem. This is an energy trading platform, right? So ultimately, again, I go back to that statement that I made earlier. It's a backend network where the commodity of trade is energy. That means today it's chargers dispensing energy. Tomorrow, it could be energy banks dispensing energy, or energy producers selling energy to someone else. So it's an energy trading or energy exchange platform. You got to think about it in that way. So because you have buyers and sellers, and whenever there's energy activity happening between a buyer and seller, be it whatever it is, right? Be it if it's battery swapping, be it microgrid transactions, be it any of that energy transaction can be done on this. And we want to get that done. So if there are folks who are working on swapping or microgrids or battery energy banking, get on board, right? Like just ping me or the Beckn Open Collective. I'm in the Discord channels as well. We want to hear those ideas, because we don't want entrepreneurs looking at this and saying, hey, this is just a great way to do EV charging. No, that'll be a very limited view on it, right? Like you're looking at it from a short-sighted point of view. You should take the long-term thing, like, because there's enough people already doing like aggregation. Ultimately, the people who will win on that is, let's say, once this network is live, someone like Paytm comes on board, or someone like Google Maps comes on board. That's where the demand is. They've already built that distribution. They will get that demand on board. So you got to look at people who are building this should look at the long term and see, okay, what are the other stuff that I can do on top of it, and then start building for it, right? So energy banking is another one. Energy trading can be another one. Battery swapping can be another one. And we are actively looking for folks, if you're running or talking to battery swapping vendors who wants to bring that in, let me know. Like I'm happy to work with them, guide them on getting this done, because no one's looking at this space. And apart from whole battery in itself not being compatible with vehicles, the software is also not compatible with vehicles. So if you can start solving for the software piece, I think it'll be great. Hardware will get sorted out along the line. Either the government will come and sort it out, or the industry in itself will sort it out for you. So again, that's the way I would provide that feedback to the audiences that's there. This is the application that is built on both our private APIs and UEI. So this, again, it's called the InstaCharge app. It's essentially, we frame it as, It's a UPI-like app for EV charging. You can get access to any networks that's available on UEI and on our network. So here you can see Charge Zone is one of the chargers. They're in fact on UEI, right? So if you are participating in UEI, again, Charge Zone is one of the early innovators along with us who brought their chargers in. So you can literally see what it has done is it's detected where my location is and then showed that, hey, you're like probably 10 kilometers away from it. You can actually click on it and start a charging session as well. So that's the power of UEI. You can actually complete an end-to-end transaction with UEI on this, right? So you can put 50 rupees and you can pay and actually start a charging session. And that's the idea, right? The power of this platform is that to a user, this just looks extremely seamless. You don't need to know what the machinery is. Is this coming through UEI? Is this a pulse? Are you negotiating with them in real time? Nothing. Like for users, it's like, oh, okay, I have one platform where I'm getting everything. Now, is the app the right way to build this? My opinion is no. Ultimately, I see vehicles just negotiating with UEI directly and just starting charge. Like that's the world that I want to live in. So again, for folks who are listening in, I would encourage you to start thinking outside of an app, like because apps are going to be many. Getting distribution for that app and attention for that app is going to be a problem. So my focus would be, okay, come out with innovative solutions on how do I get more users to do transactions on your platform versus saying I need more installs, because that's one of the things that we optimize for at Pulse as well, which is we focus a lot on if I put up a single charger, what's the amount of utilization that I'm going to get through our platform. We don't just go ahead and just say, okay, I'm going to put all the chargers on my platform and cross my fingers and wait for people to start. No, that's not the case. You need to know, you need to actively understand and learn, look at your data and figure out, okay, what's the right way to start, having folks use it. So that's one. In terms of a live request, let me just see if I can pull up one quick demo here. So I have, there we go. All right. So this is a this is a WhatsApp interface. So this is I'm going to just do a live demo and see if this is going to, again, live demos can go really well or really bad. So you can see this. So I've just sent a hi to our WhatsApp bot and it said, okay, hey, welcome to Pulse Energy. Tap and share your location to find closest chargers. So I'm just going to share my location. So now what it's doing is I've gotten a location. It's asked me which vehicles do you want. I'm going to click on four-wheeler. What is happening right now that you're seeing on the screen is a live request that's going to UEI. UEI is broadcasting it to all the CPOs and asking, hey, there is a user called Akhil. He's asked for chargers, a four-wheeler charger. Send me the ones that's available to that user. And here's the charger list. So you can see the first closest chargers, the second closest chargers, third closest. So I can click on one of them. So I'm just going to click it through my phone rather than this. So I'm going to click on the fifth closest charger, for example, and I can send that request out. So now it tells me, okay, how much would you want to charge for? Let's say I type in 10. Well, I need to type in from my phone. So I'm going to type in 10 rupees. Now it's going to show you, do you want to pay using UPI or, using UPI or using a link? Again, I'm going to pause the demo till here. So what you just seen here, is that simplest use case that I showed you earlier, right? Which is search. Like, how do you do the search? That's exactly what we did. We just said hi, shared a location. It extracted the location and asked me what kind of chargers do you need? Do you need four-wheeler chargers? Great. Combine those two and just send that request to all the CPOs. Like we just broadcasted it through UEI, right? And all these CPOs these are your CPOs that's participating with us who had UEI, again, BPP protocol, right? They just said, yep, I have one, here you go, right? And that's the response that came out here, right? So you have like the 5 closed chargers nearby, all of them, here's 30 kilowatt, here's the rate, here's what is available. So you can see as a user, you could easily build this again. And that's my focus on this, right? Like the reason I'm showing you a WhatsApp based demo is that it's to make sure that you don't restrict your thinking whenever you're building on platforms like this. Don't restrict it to just applications. I'm going to make this glitzy app, and I'm going to show way fancier UX. No, that's a wrong way of building it. Focus on transactions. How do you increase transactions? And that's the key metric that you need to keep on optimizing for. So, and that's one of the key things in UEI. And again, this abstracts all of that conversation, right? Like, how did it do? What command did it search and all this stuff? So now I'll get to that, right? Like, how does it work? So before I get to that, Ansha, so any questions on this so far?
No question, Akhil. I mean, I can't believe that charging your vehicle can be as seamless as just sending a WhatsApp message and doing it completely via WhatsApp. You're completely platform agnostic. Everybody uses WhatsApp. All charging providers are on the network. I mean, this is wonderful for the users.
Yep, exactly. And that was the intent as well, right? Which was when we presented UEI to CPOs and policymakers, it was, if I'd shown the app, they would have been like, oh, it's your app. Why would I use your app? And they automatically link it with, anything that I tell them with that application. So the idea was, again, whenever people think about building on Beckn, you need to present a very, open ecosystem conversation. If someone needs to buy into your idea, or someone needs to be convinced on something like on like UEI or Beckn, you need to first abstract yourself out of the startup or the company that you're working with. You need to start looking at it as, this is an open ecosystem. Here's how that thing would be built. And here's an example of how it can be built. And that's the reason why we picked WhatsApp, because it was the simplest way to communicate to someone. And as you rightly said, it was so simple, like just send a hi and just you get the charger nearby and you just get charging, right? So that was the idea. So I'll just shift gears into how does this work architecturally, right? I think a lot of people in this audience will want to know, okay, how does this thing work? What is the what's all this thing that you put together? So there are three parts to this. So you can see the blue box, that's the application side. And this is again a very simplified form of the of the entire architecture. So there's an application side, there's a UEI side. So this is where the network resides or registries reside. And then you have the CPO side, which is the charge point operator side. On the application side, this is where our application resides, and this is where the WhatsApp bot is. And then this is our ecosystem, right? So you'll have someone else's ecosystem, someone else's own BAP. You can have Google Maps here or Google Pay here. Anyone could come in and build on that, right? As long as they have the UEI certification. Now, how do you speak to each other? The way you speak to each other is by creating these endpoints. So these will be literally like, whatever that, like the UEI's endpoint, you ping them and say, hey, UEI dot something, or search something dot UEI dot IN. And you would say / on search, and then you would send a context or a payload that says, hey, this is InstaCharge as an app. Here's a user. They're looking for two-wheeler vehicle charging. They need DC charging. They're looking at CCS2 connectors, and the power rating should be above something. So that message contains enough metadata that explains to the network, this is what this user is looking at or looking for. If anyone has it, send it over. So what ends up happening is the request is sent through to UEI. UEI has a gateway, which is like a registry. The registry simply has search and on-search implemented. That's it. So its task is solely to get any search request. It would just broadcast it across to everyone. Any other CPO that's on the network, right? And then on the CPO side, you have if anyone's familiar with the EV charging space, there are chargers, and then there is a CMS that manages the charger. A CMS is like a charger management system. Now, that CMS would have another additional component called BPP, which would be entertaining or understanding that kind of messages that's coming back and forth. So very simple. It gets that search request. The BPP can take the decision of saying, hey, I want to fetch, like, this looks like a genuine user. I want to go ahead and respond back to them. I'm going to ask the CMS what charges are available, give me the CCS2 charges that's available, and then sends that response back. So now what's happening at the BAP side, on the application side, is you're going to get a lot of responses back. You may have, Tata respond back. You may have Fortum respond back. We have, Kazam respond back. All of those requests will come back into this. You would present that information, and the way you want to present is up to you, right? So do you want to wait, give a user a spinning wheel till the time all the responses are there? Or do you want to show the choices that's readily available as soon as the responses come in? Or do you want to set a timeout to each of these CPOs and say, hey, if you don't give me a response in X seconds, I'm going to call it a day and show whatever the remaining, right? That is the app constraints and the app rules that you can set. So that's, again, in your ecosystem, you can define what it needs to be. For us, when we build the WhatsApp bot, you can see that when we send the request, we actually waited till everyone responds back, right? So that's the basic framework. All of these commands that you see are very similar to what is there in ONDC implementations as well. You're not going to see anything different. What's different is the message and the payload that goes on. A payload for mobility might be very different. A payload for UEI might be very different. A payload for ONDC, general trade might be very different. That's the difference between all these architectures. Remaining, everything just stays the same. There isn't a change that happens. So that's the idea. So yeah, I'll pause there. Any questions on this?
Yeah. So earlier, while you were talking about how you build Pulse Energy, you mentioned that whenever anybody is trying to build something, don't focus too much around the aesthetics of the app or how many problems can you solve. Have a simple use case, build on it, validate, right? So obviously, people who want to build something are always worried about how much time did it take you to build all of this. So can you tell us how much time did it take from the idea to the first implementation with Pulse Energy on UEI?
Sure. So we took, again, we were very particularly motivated to solve this. So we took like less than 4 weeks to put all of this together. So the conversation started maybe, it was like Feb, because again, I'll give you the timeline first. So we started the conversation in Feb. Within a month, we were like aligned on here's a spec. And then within like 2 or 3 weeks, we just, did the whole thing. In fact, the actual coding was done in 2 weeks. Like whatever programming that we had to do was just done in 2 weeks and we went live. And it was one of the biggest reason was not, I wouldn't just say it's just, hey, Pulse Energy getting things done quickly, but it was the effort that the Beckn team did. I think they helped simplify this a lot for us, because we were bringing two worlds together, right? Like two different worlds who never spoke to each other. And we came from a world, it's all centralized architectures. There are existing roaming protocols as well. And we were looking at it as, hey, sorry, my WhatsApp's pinging, and I apologize for the noise there. But that was the idea, right? Like it was bringing two worlds together, and then, putting those, like bringing those two worlds together couldn't have been done without the Beckn team's help. And that is mainly the timeline. So again, this is not rocket science. Understanding what Beckn is, it just requires like a week or less than a week, just reading stuff up. Like I didn't know the in depths of Beckn. I don't think even I know today, like the extent to which Sujit or Ravi, or you guys might know. I don't have that much level of depth, but it was necessary to understand. Like again, the rule book is very simple, or the playbook is very simple. Start with the simplest use case. Don't try to boil the ocean. Do a prototype. Like bias for action is extremely key in this ecosystem, because you can spend hours, days, months, quarters just discussing an idea. But if you don't get an execution, you're just not going to work, right? Like you can talk to as many customers as you want. All of that can happen. Like if we had gone to CPOs and said, hey, we're going to figure out this decentralized network, would you be interested? No, like everyone, why would I do that? Like I have my own network, I have my own budget, I'm happy, I'm going to go explore that. The idea was just keep going at it, shouldn't be a problem.
Awesome. Like building on top of what Akhil said, I'm going to do a very shameless plug-in here. Like Akhil said, Beckn might seem like a very big and confusing universe, but understand it is very simple, very grassroots level concepts. If you can grasp those concepts, like Akhil said, it will only take 1 week to do so. So sometimes when anything new comes into the market, we usually get intimidated by, oh, what is this? What are these people building? There's a lot of FOMO, but it's actually very simple. And if you are looking to build with Beckn or understand it better, the best place to do is the Beckn Open Collective community. The community is always there to support you, to help you out. Even if you're building something, there's a lack of funds, everything is open source, people are always contributing. So feel free to reach out to the community, join the community, start discussions. Experts like Akhil uh, are also available there to answer all your questions. So yeah, moving on.
Yeah, it's
So
that's an important takeaway, right? Initially I had that FOMO, like not FOMO, I had that whole friction as well, right? Like when I was like, oh God, like this looks like a massive network. ONDC is getting rolled out. I'm sure there's like a lot of bells and whistles. You're running up against Amazons and the Flipkarts. So my whole
yeah.
thing was, this is going to be complex. Like there's going to be so many things in there. But once you start digging into it, you realize it's like, again, all of that goes towards that simplest use case. Start boiling it down and see what you can do, and then you start getting to the depths of it, right? Then okay, this is simple. This is how a handshake happens. This is what it is. And the Beckn Open Collective team, like in Discord, they're extremely helpful. If you're even having challenges just setting up a server, like there are enough number of people to help you out. Shouldn't be a problem. So there's just like two parts of the whole journey, right? One is understanding what Beckn is, how does it work, and then second is implementation of it. Implementation, there's enough support out there that you can get. And again, my WhatsApp and emails open, so drop me an email. Happy to help brainstorm ideas or even support new ideas, right? I think it's key that people start building new use cases. Like EV charging is a done thing, right? Like this gets boring. Where I want to spend my time is like, hey, what are the new ideas that can be built on top of it? So I think that's where I'm kind of interested in hearing on what are the interesting energy trading activities that can be done on something like UEI.
Awesome. And I think if anybody wants to get started, especially with UEI in the energy domain with Beckn, I think Akhil is also looking for some contributions. I'm sure Akhil can talk you through all of those, and we'll be publishing them on the community. So keep a lookout for that. And rather than going out and exploring by yourself, here is directly a great opportunity landing on your inboxes or in the community to kind of get started with Akhil's mentorship, of course. What kind of other use cases do you believe are possible with UEI, except other than that we just discussed with Pulse Energy?
So I think one of the key things, like in the app as well, right? Like just thinking out loud, right? So UEI is this network where you can exchange or trade energy. One of the things that we want to do is whenever someone's in the app, if someone's opened up a charger, and let's say the rate of that charger is like 20 rupees. In the future, if there is a use case where there is a microgrid that is operating using the Beckn protocol, it speaks the Beckn protocol. It's sitting there, it's captured energy from solar, banked it, put it in batteries. Can we actually purchase that? Or can an application or a buyer say, I want to purchase that energy for my energy transactions and then do net metering in the backend with the discom? That's possible. Like that's the universe that we want to be in, right? Like where energy becomes sort of decentralized, or energy transactions become decentralized. So if anyone's there building those energy banks, that's a very big use case where people could, and that's where we're headed. Like we want to go there too, but we just don't have the time to get to that position, right? Again, and that's where we're expecting a lot of other folks to kind of start thinking about it. And we have, in fact, there are small startups who are coming in and starting exploring that area. But that's where we want to get UEI to, because it's a unified energy interface. So the idea is provide that ecosystem where it's not just EV charging, it's battery swapping, it's energy trading, energy banks being aggregated. Can we do that, right? So let's say if there are companies that actually aggregate energy and then sell it into exchanges, right? Can we do that? Can someone actually have Like in Surat, people can just buy energy banks, put up solar and just store that in, and then sell that energy. Like you in UK, right now, there's like the whole V2G concept is a vehicle to grid. So if you bring your vehicle in and you park your vehicle at home, you have the opportunity to sell what is there in your vehicle back into the grid and get money for it, right? So that capability is there. Can you do that? If that's possible, like again, the reality of that happening in India might be pretty far away, but it doesn't necessarily have to be vehicle to grid. It can be just a battery pack sitting there storing solar energy, and you are using UEI to sell that energy to someone, right? Can we do that? Because again, there's going to be a buyer and there's going to be a seller. As long as both of them are going to trade energy, UEI can fit that use case. So if anyone in this audience is thinking about those use cases, let us know. Again, don't think centralized systems, think decentralized systems, because the only way energy ecosystem is going to scale is through multiple participants. You can't scale this. Even India's grid, in order to scale to the energy demands that is needed in the country, it needs to have a platform like this. So that's where we start kind of looking at it, and that's sort of the roadmap that we have.
Okay, so I will take this moment to pose a question to the audience listening. If energy is a resource, how do you imagine enabling it with Beckn, or do you feel you can imagine it with Beckn? You have Akhil's input till now. Feel free to punch in your answers in the chat box. Towards the end of the session, maybe Akhil can go through them and have a comment on it. How maybe he can give his expert insights on some of the use cases. So feel free to punch in your answers in the chat box. Okay, Akhil. So I will move on to the next question. So talking about everything we do here at Beckn, community is at the heart and core of everything. Can you tell us how did the community? There was obviously the members at Beckn team helping you out, but how did the community kind of help, and what kind of future expectations you have from this community?
So I think where I would go with this is use case generation, right? I think obviously we need support, like building new use cases and supporting existing transactions and stuff. But keeping that aside, like that'll be very selfish of me to say that, but if I truly have to look at where participation needs to be, there is participating in building new networks out, like actively going to CPOs and talking to them, educating them about what UEI is, and contributing to that ecosystem. I think the key next step, like demand is solved. Like you have the day that you have like 10 CPOs, 20 CPOs on UEI, demand problem of getting people or getting as many users to start a charging session is going to be solved. Like you're going to have apps standing in a queue to get it, right? Like PhonePe will come in, Google Pay will come in, all of these guys will come in. I think the key is going to be contributing to getting CPOs on board, because CPOs today in India, charge point operators today in India, they need to upgrade themselves to something like this. So I would, go ahead and start focusing on that, the education part of it, and then obviously implementation of this, right? How do you contribute to UEI as an infrastructure? So right now, the state of UEI, I would say, is again still in the sort of alpha phase. We need to put this on a proper infrastructure. There needs to be a certification process. So that's where I think most of, at least my work or the core team's work would be. We are starting a community call on a weekly basis, where, or bi-weekly basis, where we would bring in those ideas. So there'll be a slot allocated for just idea generation, right? Hey, if someone has a great idea, spend like 5 minutes talking about what that is, or share those ideas in this Discord group, get support. Right now, like we don't have that much time to contribute to UEI. So if other folks want, like who has coding experience, who wants to actively code and implement open sourced infrastructure, let me know. Like, happy to, provide. We have a lot of work on UEI that needs to be done. And that's the tech contribution part of it. From a business contribution part of it, like if someone's looking to, okay, I want to build a startup on top of UEI, my focus to them would be, build something for the CPOs. Don't build on the app side, because app side is saturated. Again, I'm not discouraging everyone from it, but that's the reality, right? Like, once ONDC was on board, I think, now Magic Pin and Phone Pay and Paytm, all of those guys are coming on board, right? So demand side is not going to be a problem. It's actually the supply side. So how do you get existing charge point operators or existing swapping station operators or existing microgrids or someone who's building energy banks? How are you going to get them, like, and that's where the innovation happens, because it's an innovation both on the business front and tech front. Tech, it's already solved, right? Like, how you can trade energy from that system. The key question would be, why would someone do that, right? So how do you convince the largest charge point operator in India today to actually come on to UEI? And they're not going to do it for free. Like, it's you've got to think of a better business case that would bring them on board, right? So how do you do that? What's the innovation there? So those are kind of the two contribution areas. One being just tech aspect, which again, there's enough amount of work. Be on the Discord group. Happy to help do the introductions and get everyone started. On the business case, there is enough, like that's where the real thinking needs to be, right? Like, how do you get these CPUs on board? How do you get the grids on board? How do you get charge point operators, swapping stations on board? Like, that's where the true innovation is, and there needs to be enough thinking around that.
I see a couple of people asking in the chats about how they can contribute to UEI, or is there a place in BOC to do so. We do have a working group, and we obviously have a very open governance model. Anybody can contribute to the development of the protocol, towards adopting it, any uh, improvements that you might want to suggest that we might have missed out. So please feel free to do that. Everything is, how can you contribute, how are contributions accepted, all of that is available on the GitHub for Beckn Protocol, the link for which is already in the chat. And the working group regularly meets up and chats on the Discord server, a link to which is also there. So these two resources, and you're good to go to get started with any contribution that you might want to make to UEI. Right now, open systems, this whole DPG, DPI world, all that seems like somehow can also be classified as buzzwords, but a question often persists, which is around the economics of these systems and such open business models. So can you help us understand how building a business on Beckn is different from traditional business models, and if it is better, and how?
So the way I look at this is from a business model point of view, right? Again, and this goes back to like the question that I asked earlier, like, how do you convince a CPO to get onto UEI, right? Let's say the largest oil company in India right now, how do you convince them to bring their chargers? And it's their infrastructure. They have put in like 50 CR worth of infrastructure, and they've built their IT infrastructure already. The question and the business model is, like, when you think about a business model, that's the biggest challenge that I would put out there, right? Which is, how do you convince that oil company to bring their chargers onto this platform? Because traditionally that has not been the case, right? If you look at any trade, it's always been closed loop. Like, you need to knock a door to get access to stuff. So, and that's what ONDC did, right? Like, which is, ONDC just removed that door completely and said, look, all these sellers are there. Everyone gets access to everyone, right? And that's the beauty about DPIs, like digital public infrastructures, is you're enabling, you're democratizing access to those, physical entities. So now, when you build a business case on top of it, you need to incentivize maybe the sellers, and sellers are the oil companies. How do you incentivize? And that's where I said, this is not a tech challenge, because tech is already solved. It's a business challenge. So the people entering the space, you want to look at this as, okay, how do I bring a new business innovation into it? And I'll give you a very classic example. In the US, in European markets, there is so when you have to issue carbon credits to people, right? You need to have an audit of the exact flow of energy. So all the way from generation to consumption, generation, transmission, and consumption, and that's your clean energy chain. But these are different systems. Generation is done by a different IT system. Transmission is done by a different IT system. Consumption is done by a different IT system. How do you bring all of these things together? Okay, so now let's say I build all of this on UEI. If I tie this into an immutable data structure and I say, hey, here's all the records of that entire audit. No one can change it. It's completely immutable. This is how it is. Can we start using that to generate carbon credits? Like, can I use that as a source of truth to a carbon credit provider and say, look, this is what the ledger is. This is what the transaction looks like. Give me money, right? So now you get carbon credits for that, right? So now you have money on the table. So how do you think about it as, hey, as a CPO, you can go to them and say, you know what, I can do this for you. I can help you do this. And that too, using this technology. And irrespective of where your energy comes from, I will go get that for you. I'll do that auditing. I'll do that traction. And that's what carbon, there are a lot of carbon credit startups trying to solve for this problem. Same thing, like you build that on this open network. Imagine if like you as a company is doing this for the CPO. Let's say tomorrow there's an audit that's happening. There's an issue of, hey, you've been fudging, carbon credit data or something. Since it's on an open network, now someone could come in and just say, hey, you know what, this is all open. It's kept there. You can look at the transactions and figure out, right? Again, UEI does not store any of this data. You need that layer that does that, right? So that's how I would think about business cases. You got to like think really big in terms of how do you solve for those problems. So it comes from understanding the business problems in itself. So always my feedback would be, don't look at it as, hey, here's a great tech idea, here's a great solution. Don't go searching for a problem. Don't do that. That's the worst kind of problem solving. So find a problem, talk to CPOs, and talk to enough people out there who's in the charging industry or the energy trading or energy industry in general. Just understand a great problem. And if there is a way to make money by solving that problem, then bring the solution on board. I would suggest going in that route.
Great. I think I will pose my last question to you because we have a very eager audience. They have been punching in their questions. It would be unfair of me to take all of your time and not have their questions answered. So my last question to you would be, what is next for Pulse Energy? How do you see it evolving?
Yeah, so for us, it's predominantly helping the CPOs get onto UEI, right? I think that's where the journey is going to be because we prove that this works with the pilot CPOs. I think the next step is getting everyone onto this platform. That's where our journey is, I think, and it's going to be a long journey. It's not like I send a flyer out or we post this video out and CPOs are going to start waiting on this. I think it's going to be a long-winded journey. Again, it's a business problem. This is not a tech problem. This is a business problem that needs to be solved. So that's where it is going to be.
Okay. I will be taking the audience's question now. I will be reading one by one to them to you, Akhil. So I think the first question here is, what is the revenue model for Pulse Energy?
I would keep that out of this conversation. So I would just say, like again, that's very different from we are very early on in the process of building the startup. So if I tell you something, probably in a week it'll change. So it doesn't make sense to do that.
Makes sense. So how did you get these big companies to adopt UEI? Someone has asked.
Yeah, so that's where the business part comes in, right? Like you need to, and my simple example is very, like the first few was very simple. One, you need to have that relationship already established, right? So you need to be in this industry. If you're in this industry and you know people, then it's easy. Second is convincing them that there is a future here, right? I think that comes as if you're in like looking to build your own startup or you're trying to look at building your business, you need to have storytelling as part of that toolkit. You need to be able to pitch a good story. And that was it, right? Like the whole point of something like UEI is the fact that we could drive up utilization, much larger than what two companies put together. Like if Pulse Energy and the CPO comes together, like UEI could unlock revenue potential much higher than that, right? Because if a phone pay or a Google Pay or let's say even if Apple Pay comes in tomorrow, like they can access this. If Tata Motors could access UEI and just start charging all at any chargers without having to set up expensive agreements with large companies, that's amazing, right? Like that's where UEI could go. And the fact that it works on the other side as well. Like it's setting up a charging station is a de-licensed activity. Someone in Telangana could set up a charging station and not worry about I need to drive up demand. No, they don't need to, because once they hook it up to UEI, it's automatically available across the ecosystem. And that's the power. Like, and that's exactly what ONDC is doing, right? Like you have a seller sitting there with some product that they're selling. They don't have to actively go and build that demand. They don't need to. And that's what all this other startups, closed loop systems did. Amazon, Flipkart, Meesho, everyone has been building that. Most of the money is being spent in that marketing budget. Get me those eyeballs, go there. That's what they've been doing. We don't need that. ONDC has, and that's where I love the Beckn team and the way they have structured this out, right? They fundamentally boiled down, here's the transaction layer. Then they went and built a hero use case, which is ONDC, and proved that that works. Now you're going to other layers, right? Other transactions. So yeah.
Arun, I hope that answers your question. Moving on to the next one. Are you looking at onboarding CPOs or also looking at C2C type of model? Are there any platform constraints?
So this will be onboarding more CPOs. I think that's the key thing here. Like ultimately, the success of this will depend. Like you can't drive up demand when there's just one supplier on the network. It needs to be multiple sellers. Otherwise, it'll just be a supplier-driven network. So that's the focus. I didn't understand what C2C type of model mean though. Platform
customer to customer, consumer to consumer, customer
to consumer, like more like I'm assuming it's like a peer-to-peer network, like where I have a charger. If I set up a charger, can someone else use it? Yeah, absolutely. Like that's going to be there. Like because if you set up a charger and you're now becoming a seller on the platform, like that will eventually happen. Are there any platform constraints? No. Again, like this is UEI ultimately is just an API schema, like sorry, API contract. That's all it is. There's nothing else to it.
All right. Okay, so we have a question concerning China. China has a lot of charging stations. Any lessons that you have learned from other countries?
No, like again, see, India has a very different demographic. India has a very different power distribution structures. I wouldn't want to speculate anything at the moment. Like we are drawing our own journeys. Like for example, even if you look outside, right? Like the US market, we implemented for four-wheelers CCS2 chargers. That's the DC charger adapter that is there in all Indian four-wheeler vehicles. Overnight, within like the past 2 weeks, all major EV OEMs in the US switched to Tesla's connector. Like, so should we have done that? No, like again, it's all changing so quickly. I think we as a country should look at what's really solving our problem and just focus on, is this the right solution for it, versus saying, because everyone makes mistakes. No one's perfect. Even China has made mistakes. Even US has made mistakes. I wouldn't look at it that way.
Great. Any plans of renewable energy integration?
Yeah, so that's the microgrid energy trading piece, right? Which is where you can actually bank energy in battery packs and then push it back into the grid. So there is going to be buyers who's going to look at purchasing renewable energy in UEI. Like that soon is going to be a reality. So if you're looking at, if there is a company out there that has a bunch of batteries, they're putting together battery banks, they're building battery banks as a backup power or as something else, there will be a need for someone to purchase that energy, right? Because they're now a supplier. They have energy stored in a captive state inside a battery. with UEI, you now have an ecosystem where you can actually purchase that energy. So that's a renewable energy use case.
Great. I think we are towards the end of questions. I think all the questions are done. We are also towards the end of the session. I asked the audience to suggest some use cases. We have two. Let's quickly go over them and wrap it up. That being said, guys, if you still have any questions, like I said, Akhil is available on Discord. We have a dedicated UEI channel, which Akhil is very, very active in. So feel free to punch in all your questions, and it would be a great place for you guys to connect with Akhil as well. So, okay. So one use case would be to allow users to buy energy in bulk and give them competitive pricing. And at the service layer too, you can buy energy in bulk from various CPOs and work on the margins. Possible business model. Another suggested use case. Similarly, creating a protocol for all mobility service provider platforms such as micro-mobility operators, shared bikes, bicycles, public transport, ride-hailing services to integrate all shared mobility options to make users shift to sustainable modes of transport and making it easier and simpler. So,
yeah, that becomes a mobility use case, right? Yeah, that becomes a mobility use case. Again, and another thing I think we should highlight this. So apart from, and thank you for kind of calling that out, Ansha. So the beauty about Beckn-enabled networks is that they can speak to each other. So to give you an example, imagine Starbucks, there's a charging station outside it. If you're a person who goes there, scans the QR code, starts a charging session, that charging session is on UEI, you get like a QR code that talks about the charging transaction. Now, let's say you walk into a Starbucks and you're purchasing something through the ONDC network, you're purchasing coffee. You could actually show them this, transaction, get a discount on that coffee, right? And those two systems do not have to speak to each other ever, right? Just because it's built on the same Beckn protocol, you now have vertical conversations without having to have any preset agreements defined, which is where I think I was blown away by sort of the use cases that you can build on this, right? So if anyone's out there like building mobility platforms, let's say like something like Namayatri or something like Uber on Beckn, imagine a scenario where a driver could literally come and take his car, get the ride, and then later on charge for free or charge with certain renewable clean energy. All of that can happen within that same network, right? So it could be just speaking the same language. So cross vertical is also another interesting area that people can look at, can explore. So yeah, so just putting that out there, like that's also an avenue that you can explore integrating.
Yeah. Since we're talking about, since mobility has come up, I want to do a small announcement. Willgrow, through their incubation program, is looking to support sustainable mobility startups. They would help you with finding seed funding, conducting market research, testing prototypes, and accessing mentorship networks. So if you're building in the sustainable mobility domains, feel free to apply for Willgrow's cohort. The application link will be in the chat, and make sure to apply before 15th July this year, because that's the kind of deadline. So yeah, coming back. So I think we are pretty much at the end of this. We've discussed everything we could in the time we had today. We'll never have enough time. We can keep at it for hours, but here we are. Thank you, Akhil. Thank you so much for taking out time and addressing the community today. This has been extremely insightful. Guys, if you have missed some part of this session, don't worry, a complete recording will be available on YouTube. Feel free to spread it in your network as well and motivate more and more people to join the community to make any kind of contributions you want to. Any closing words, Akhil? Anything from you for anybody who's trying to get Beckn implemented?
No, so first of all, thank you for organizing this. I think it is really necessary, and it's the perfect timing as well. We are looking for more volunteers on UEI. It's crazy how it's panned out in the last 6 months. In the past 6 months, I think it's very important for the next 6 months also to be crucially in an accelerated manner, right? It needs to grow in that manner. So again, we are looking for people who can help grow UEI better, both on the tech front and the business front. So if you have business use cases, just feel free to ping me on Discord. If you have tech use cases, just ping me again. Happy to help you get looped in.
Awesome. I had a great time. I hope everybody else here enjoyed. Thank you so much, Akhil.
Thank you.
And hopefully we'll see you in the community.
Yeah, awesome.